Okay, welcome to Lesson 10 of Part 2 Advanced Answers for IELTS Speaking 7.5. Again, we're calling it 7.5 because we're ambitious. This course is for anyone that wants to progress 6 beyond, 6.5 beyond, 7 and beyond. Right, so let's get straight into it. So, I'll quickly go over this again, but I've said this at the beginning of each lesson, so I'll do it quicker this time. So the logic of your story is important for Part 2. It's not important because the examiner will be scoring your logic. It's important because that's how you get into the right frame of mind for organizing your ideas and speaking confidently and then sounding and being natural. So the logic is not something you are scored on, but it is something which will massively influence your performance and therefore your score. So the logic is key to feeling confident and delivering a good natural answer. The task bullet points are a guide to help you. They're just a guide, and they're a good guide. They usually follow a similar pattern, fairly logical pattern actually, and they help you in your preparation stage. So let's start with a real question and train ourselves from there. Right, Part 2, question type, object. There's many different object question types that can come up in Part 2, but I'm going to tackle one which is a bit more difficult and usually requires a bit more specific lexis or vocabulary. So, describe an old object that is meaningful to you and your family. An old object that is meaningful to you and your family. Describe an old object that is meaningful to you and your family. Well, this question is really asking you about a family heirloom, something which has been passed down from generation to generation, an heirloom. Sometimes the question is phrased differently, and it asks about a piece of jewellery or a photograph or something which has been kept in your family. Let's prepare and train ourselves to talk about old objects, and then we can cover a whole range of possible Part 2 questions. So, describe an old object that's meaningful to you and your family. Say what the object is, what it looks like and what it does, who has the object now, and where is it kept. Why is it meaningful? Okay. Pretty standard bullet points. Again, you will see a slight variety of different bullet points in the test, but they're pretty much the same and they follow a general WH logic. What, who, why, where, etc. So, let's think about this first. Typical meaningful objects. Think of something first that you can describe quite easily. So don't choose something which is really difficult to describe. Choose something which is not too difficult to describe, but you can describe it well. A photograph, maybe, a picture or a painting, an old piece of jewellery, an antique or a decoration, a piece of furniture, a book, an item of clothing. Maybe you are better at describing one or two of these than another one or two of these. You know, some people, we have different strengths and weaknesses depending on what we're interested in, depending on our educational history, depending on what we have been reading. So, you know, you could choose one of these, but choose the one that you find easiest to talk about, not necessarily the one which you find the most exciting. So, Part 2 task. Describe an object, an old object that is meaningful to you and your family. Say what the object is, what it looks like and what it does, who has the object now and where it is kept. Why is it meaningful? Right. I'd like to talk about a photo in a frame. It's a black and white photo of my grandparents' wedding in 1935. The frame is rectangular and about the size of a small notebook. In the photo, they are wearing their wedding clothes. My grandpa is wearing a black suit and a white shirt and tie. My grandmother is wearing a red Chinese-style dress called a qipao. The frame is very ornate. It is made of grey metal. I think it is silver. It has a small metal stand and it's fairly solid and heavy. It sits on the shelf and it's a special decoration. Okay, it's a pretty good introduction, even if I say so myself. Why is this a good introduction? Why? Let's take a look. Describing objects. Let's talk first about describing objects like an heirloom. What it is, its shape and size, its appearance, its colour and characteristics, what it's made of, what it's used for. Notice I cover all of these aspects. This is a good map, if you like, a good framework when you're describing an object, what it is, shape and size, appearance, what it's made of, what it's used for. What it is, shape and size, appearance, what it's made of, what it's used for. A good 4-step, 5-step formula for when you have to describe something. Look and listen to the introduction to the answer again and think how I follow these 5 points. I'd like to talk about a photo in a frame. It's a black and white photo of my grandparents' wedding in 1935. The frame is rectangular and about the size of a small notebook. In the photo, they're wearing their wedding clothes. My grandpa is wearing a black suit, a white shirt and tie. My grandmother is wearing a red Chinese style dress called a qipao. The frame is very ornate. It is made of grey metal. I think it's silver. It has a small metal stand and is fairly solid and heavy. It sits on the shelf and it's a special decoration. So, introducing what it is. In fact, there are 2 things I do in one here, you'll notice. See how I deal with this. I'd like to talk about a photo in a frame. It's a black and white photo of my grandparents' wedding in 1935. A photo in a frame. And then I go on to talk about both the photo and the frame. The reason I use this is because this is a good example for training, because it means that you and me today can talk about photos and about frames. So, it's good to practice these combined answers, because then you're more flexible and more versatile in the test if you do get asked about a photo or an object like a frame or a piece of jewellery. So yeah, I talk about both the photo and the frame together. There's different examples where we can introduce things, but we must get our measure words correct. I'd like to talk about an item of clothing. We could say a piece of clothing. I'd like to talk about an item of clothing. I'm going to talk about a piece of furniture. I'd like to tell you about a piece of jewellery. I want to talk about an old pair of glasses. I'll tell you about an antique pair of chopsticks. So, item, piece, pair, let's get these right. Remember, a lot of items you would just say a or an. A photo album, an antique. A picture, an armchair. A bracelet. Remember to pronounce the N in an. Otherwise it doesn't sound very good in English and you can actually cause misunderstandings. An antique. An antique. An armchair. An armchair. So practice the final N combined with obviously the beginning of usually a vowel beginning with A. Okay, let's move on. So, 2, what it looks like or what it does. So, describing an object that's meaningful to you and your family, we talk about what the object is, following the steps I've just suggested, and what it looks like or what it does. Okay, we can break this down into steps as well to make it easier. Its shape and size, its appearance, other characteristics, what it's made of, as I mentioned earlier. We're drilling down now. After stating what the object is, we follow these points while training yourself to describe objects. So, let's look at the next sentence in bold. The frame is rectangular and about the size of a small notebook. So, I'd like to talk about a photo in a frame. It's a black and white photo of my grandparents' wedding in 1935. The frame is rectangular and about the size of a small notebook. Okay, that's a nice short sentence to describe shape and size. The frame is rectangular and about the size of a small notebook. So there's different, more mature, more advanced ways we can describe objects, and this is a good example. Square, rectangular, triangular, round, oval. About the size of a hand. About the size of a small notebook. About the size of a novel. About the size of a man's head. Use a comparison to make it more interesting. About 1 centimetre across. About 1 centimetre across. Just big enough to fit in your hand. Just big enough to fit in your shirt pocket. So these are more native speaker comparisons, if you see what I mean. So copy these down. Think of objects which are more or less these sizes and how you can use them to describe them if that happens to come up in the test that you want to. Its appearance. Let's look at the next phrase. In the photo, they're wearing their wedding clothes. My grandpa is wearing a black suit, a white shirt and a tie, and my grandmother is wearing a red Chinese-style dress called a qipao. Okay. The frame is very ornate. So its appearance. So there's two things I describe here. This is where I describe the photo and the frame. So in the photo they're wearing their wedding clothes. My grandpa is wearing a black suit, a white shirt and tie. Sorry, a red Chinese style dress called a qipao. The frame is very ornate, decorative, lots of decorations in it. We use ornate usually for something carved or shaped from metal, like a piece of jewellery or a picture frame like this one. So, I do two things. I give an exact description, the photo itself, and what's in the photo, and an adjectival description of the frame. It's very ornate. So this is a really high-scoring answer because I've used two different techniques, if you like. Right, so different descriptive adjectives to describe common objects. The painting depicts a man in a military uniform. Military uniform. An ornate, decorative piece of jewellery. A frame or design. So a design, a frame, a piece of jewellery can be ornate or decorative. A colourful painting, fresco, decoration. An elaborate design, a simple design, an elegant design. An elaborate design, a simple design, an elegant design. An intricate piece of jewellery or design. A fashionable, trendy item of clothing. A loose-fitting, tight-fitting, stylish item of clothing. So these are good words, these are good adjectives to describe these kind of objects. I suggest you copy them down, you memorize them, and you write sentences of when you would use these. Ornate, decorative, colourful, elaborate, simple, elegant, intricate. Intricate is for very, very detailed. Again, usually like a piece of detailed design or artwork or jewellery. Fashionable, trendy, loose-fitting, tight-fitting for clothing or stylish. You don't need lots of fancy vocabulary, but you do need the vocabulary like this that you can use well, and you'll sound very, very native. Okay, this is a task for you. Adjectives to describe certain types of objects. Now, some of this takes a little bit of reading and experience. So list of possible adjectives to describe objects is endless, but we don't need that many. So pause this video and do this task. Pause the video after this and think of 4 objects. Make a list of the adjectives you would use to describe these objects. Go online and read collocations and that are common with these objects. just like I've shown you some typical ones. An ornate frame, an ornate piece of jewellery, a detailed design, etc. Write simple phrases with the collocations that you can find online. Again, not complicated, just collocations which we naturally use. Check your phrases. How do they sound to you? So, go through anything you find online, really, in English, of course, relating to old objects, or new objects, or designs, or pieces of equipment, and see what the collocations are when somebody describes these objects. Underline them, write them down, practice them, test them with a friend, check them in a collocation dictionary online, check, double check, and try and make a list of them in the context of descriptive simple phrases for objects. This is a very useful technique, and it's something which will help you remember if you do this kind of task yourself. Okay, so what's it made of? So we're looking down to the bottom of the paragraph here in bold, as you can see. See in bold? Oops, there. It's made of grey metal. I think it's silver. It has a small metal stand, like a leg, so it can stand up, and it's fairly solid and heavy. It's made of grey metal. I think it's silver. It has a small metal stand, something so the picture frame can stand up, and it's fairly solid and heavy. It's made of grey metal. I think it's silver. It has a small metal stand, and it's fairly solid and heavy. So it's made of, plus the material, wood, metal, glass, plastic, china. I think it's silver, gold, steel, aluminium. So when you're not quite sure the exact material, be honest. I think it's silver. It makes you sound like a native. I think it's gold, but I'm not sure. It has plus features. Get this verb right. Surprising how many people get it wrong. It has a metal stand. It has a gold chain. It has a leather case. Say this. It's very simple. It has this. It is plus characteristics. Heavy, light, fragile, delicate, solid. Bam. 4 simple little steps to perfect descriptions of objects. It's made of wood. I think it's teak or mahogany or a wood from almond or peach. It has a wonderful leather chain, wonderful gold chain, a wonderful leather case, a wonderful metal stand, a wonderful wooden box, whatever. It is very heavy, very light, very fragile and delicate, solid. So use these normal phrases and use them well to describe objects. Task. Yes, again, another task. Pause after the frame. Materials, features, characteristics. So think of 4 objects again. They can be the same as before. What are they made of? What's the material? Which material? If they're metal, do you know what type of metal? If they're wood, do you know what type of tree? What other features do they have? Any other characteristics you think are worth mentioning that you can mention without too much difficulty? Write short sentences, then check them, then read them aloud. Again, keep training yourself, but use these steps, these description steps I'm teaching you, because they will actually make you sound much more native, because this is pretty much how we describe things. So, part 2 task. We've moved on from what it looks like and what it does to who has the object now and where is it kept. So, who has the object now and where is it kept? It sits on the shelf in my grandmother's house and it's a special decoration. It sits on the shelf in my grandmother's house and it's a special decoration. You see, I've added this here because it makes a richer answer. It sits on the shelf in my grandma's house, my grandmother's house. So where is it usually? Think of your object. Where is it usually? My grandmother has a big old book, a big old family book, And that usually is kept under the stairs. My mother usually keeps our family photo album in a drawer in the spare bedroom. So usually the object that you're thinking of usually has a home. It has a place where it goes, where people put it. Why not say? What's the function? It's a decoration. It's an heirloom. It's a way of keeping family memories. Photo album, for example. It's a practical tool that my grandfather uses when he does the garden, whatever it might be. What's the function? Can simply be a decoration. That can be a function. So maybe this item has a function, or is it used for anything? Does anyone use it for anything? Ask yourself these questions, because asking yourself these questions will also give you more English. They'll give you an extra small phrase to add and an extra dimension to your description. So, okay, who has it and where's it kept? These are some factual phrases. You can learn these, adapt them to your own needs, but basically memorize them and use them relevantly and flexibly in your test. My father keeps it under the bed in a box. It's hanging on the wall in the living room. Probably a picture. My mother keeps it safe in a special jewellery box. I keep it in a drawer in my room. My brother keeps it hidden in a cupboard in his bedroom. It sits on a shelf in my uncle's front room. It stands by the front door of our house. It's kept in a photo album with the other family photos. So, these are phrases you can use, again, to extend your answers, give the examiner more English, and definitely sound like a native speaker. So, task again. Who has it and where is it kept? Pause the video after this to do the task. Think of 4 objects. Again, same 4 objects as before is fine. Who keeps these objects now? And where are they? Think about that. Your 4 objects that you listed before, who keeps them and where are they kept? So, use and adapt my phrases from before to apply to these objects and write short phrases and then check them. Read them aloud. So, part 2 task. We've got to the bottom of the bullet points now. Describe an old object that's meaningful to you and your family. Why is it meaningful? Why is it meaningful? Good question. And it's a special decoration. That's all I say. And it's a special decoration. So what's its function? Its meaning? Well, it's of sentimental value to all of the family. It's a way to remember the past. It's a symbol of happiness. Our ancestors, the past. Our past. It's used for plus verb ing. It's of sentimental value. That's a nice phrase. Very, very typical English collocation there. It's of sentimental value. A great lexical chunk. Just memorize that and use it for pretty much anything which is old. It's a way to remember the past. It's a symbol of happiness. Our ancestors, the past. It's used for plus verb ing. Phrases for meanings and feelings. Nostalgia. Why something has a special meaning. It reminds me of my grandmother. It helps us remember those that died in the war. It's of great sentimental value. It's really meaningful to everyone I know. It's symbolic of health, happiness, and good fortune. It makes me feel sentimental. It makes me feel nostalgic. It makes me feel sad. These are great expressions. Use them, put them after any answer, along with any answer that you have, really. It reminds me of my grandmother. It helps us remember those that died in the war. Get these demonstrative pronouns right. Those that died in the war. Those people. It's of great sentimental value. It's really meaningful to everyone I know. It is symbolic of health, happiness, and good fortune. You might be talking about a jade bracelet or some paper at the side of the door for a spring festival. Symbolic of health, happiness, good fortune. It makes me feel sentimental. You know, a photograph, a feeling adjective, sentimental. Makes me feel nostalgic. That's a feeling adjective. Makes me feel sad. A feeling adjective. It makes me feel. Great structures again. Simple, naturally pronounced, very good structures to extend any answer about meaningful objects or memories even. So, useful native expressions again about an object in the family. Again, memorize and use these. It has been in our family for decades, generations. It has been passed down through generations. It's worth a fortune, both in money terms, monetary terms, and sentimental terms. She really cherishes it. She loves and cares for it. She really treasures it. She treats it like a treasure. She'd be heartbroken if she lost it. Nice phrases, again. A bit more advanced, a bit more colloquial. You're going to get a higher score by adding these correctly. Pause again whenever you need to. Write down all these. I'm very heavy on lexical chunks in this part. Groups of language. Phrases you can use, memorize, and put in many places in many answers if you've noticed. This technique to me is very important for speaking good English at a higher level. But get those basic grammar errors polished up as well, or it won't really work. Right, follow the mini story. This is again a little tangent here, but follow the story. Think about how you can tell a similar story. And think about this. When we're describing something of sentimental value or a memory, we've got to be really careful of our tenses, because we're using past tenses. And we don't just use one past tense. We usually use a couple. Anyway, follow my story and listen out. Well, this watch has been passed down through my family for generations. My great-grandfather passed it down to his son, my grandfather, who then passed it down to his son, my father, who then passed it down to me. So, it's been in my family a really long time. For this reason, it's very important I take good care of it so that it can continue to be passed down for generations to come. Very high-scoring answer here. I'll read it again. Think about why. Well, this watch has been passed down through my family for generations. My great-grandfather passed it down to his son, my grandfather, who then passed it down to his son, my father, who then passed it down to me. So it's been in the family a really long time. For this reason, it's very, very important I take good care of it, so it can continue to be passed down for generations to come. Great, great piece of English here. For one reason, perfect use of tenses and sequence markers. It has been passed down through my family. So you're talking in general about the whole family till now, so you're using the present perfect. It has been passed down through my family for generations. Then I move into the past simple. My grandfather passed it down to his son. Because we're not talking about the history to now, we're talking about one particular action. My grandfather passed it down to his son, an action which has a beginning and an end, who then passed it down to his son. Again, another past simple, who then completed action, passed it down to his son, who then passed it down to me. So we've got a present perfect for the whole period. It has been passed down through the generations of my family. My great-grandfather passed it down to his son, my grandfather, who then passed it down to his son, who then passed it down to me. So it has been in the family. It's been, in this case, is a contraction of it has, not it is. It has been in the family for a really long time. Again, the whole span of history, present perfect. For this reason, it's very important I take good care of it. We move to the present tense because we're talking about now. Now it's important I take good care of it so it can continue. Present tense for future. It can continue to be passed down for generations to come. Present tense plus to be infinitive to express future intention. But the intention is now. So we've got quite a few tenses. Actually, they're not complicated tenses at all, as you know, but the way they're used and the language that's used, as well as the prepositions, passed down for generations to come. There's some nice turns of phrase here which make it very native. So I would, again, you can basically copy and remember this, internalize it and use it yourself. So extra vocab for antiques and jewellery. So a little change of topic here because just to give you some vocab for talking about antiques or jewellery. You don't need anything complicated, but a few ones that cover them nicely will help you. A finger ring, a wedding ring, an engagement ring. An earring, a bracelet, beads or pearls, a necklace, a brooch, a metal object, sometimes with a stone that ladies pin in their clothes, a brooch. Gold, silver, stainless steel materials. Gold, silver, stainless steel. Diamonds, precious stones, precious stones, precious stones. Okay, you don't need many bits of vocabulary to talk about jewellery, but a few will really help you to sound natural. So vocabulary for antiques and jewellery continued. An antique, a collector's item, a rare piece of art, a painting, a sculpture, sculpture, sculpture. A ring with a diamond in it. A ring inlaid with precious stones, inlaid. Precious stones put into it. A ring inlaid with precious stones or diamonds. A bracelet inlaid with precious stones or diamonds. A necklace of expensive pearls. A pearl necklace. Again, you don't need many, but get some of these down and memorized so that you really, really sound like you have a great vocabulary in the test, because none of these are very difficult words, but it's important you use them correctly in the way I'm showing you. So, task. This is a template, a table if you like, that I'd like you to use to fill in notes about a meaningful object, or several meaningful objects. The more times you do this, the better. So, the stage. What is it? What it looks like? Who has it and where it is? And why it's meaningful. So these bullet points are a little bit different to what we talked about earlier, but that's what I want. I want us to develop a bit more of the art of flexibility based on the things I'm saying. So, what is it? What it looks like? Who has it and where is it? You can also add what its purpose is, why it is meaningful. And again, you can add lots of things we've discussed today. But I would do this with 3 or 4 objects, because I kept saying today, choose 4 objects, and I think you should. Because if you practice diversifying and using language flexibly that we learn, you will train yourself to basically answer any IELTS question. So use that template to help you. Approach. You must go back through every slide of this lesson, in my opinion. There's a lot of lexical chunks. There's a lot of great phrases, grammatically perfect phrases, given to you in great contexts, which are very relevant to IELTS. Go back, write them all down, please. How can you adapt these to old things in your life? In your family's life? Think about this. Write examples. You must write them all down and make sentences of your own with them, or you just won't remember them. And they're so juicy, they're so good, they're so native speaker. Okay, so notes on my template. Remember, the template and the bullet points in the test are a general guide. You can adjust it. You can adjust them according to the question. You can modify my templates. It's a training guide to help you practice logical steps in a story, because logical steps and logical thinking give you confidence, help you plan, and also give you a structure to train and develop greater English language. Logic is a very, very important foundation to an awful lot of communicative skills in English. The bullet points in the exam will vary, but they're a guide. So the task: use the template earlier to plan your answers. Read these Part 2 questions and write down answers in full after you've planned. Describe a photograph that someone in your family has that is meaningful to you all. Describe a photograph that someone in your family has that is meaningful to you all. Describe an old object in your family that makes you feel happy. Describe a toy from your childhood that you have good memories of. So use the advanced high-scoring collocations and lexis we've learnt today, and make sure you write really good answers to these Part 2 questions, and make sure you don't start writing and planning answers until you've done your notes and your planning stage using my template or a variation on that template. Okay, thank you very much, and until the next lesson, thank you for listening.